Hello, and wish you all a warm and wonderful 2021. I'm delighted to present to you today on this topic, demystifying product management and exploring career options. Imagine doing an exercise wherein you go to 10 of your friends and ask them what product management means to each one of them. What does a product manager do? And I wouldn't be surprised if you might end up gathering a range of responses. Make no mistake, all of these responses could be true and valid from its own perspective. But the fundamental point that I'm trying to drive clarity on here is that product management, by definition, is hazy and nebulous. The part that makes it interesting and even intriguing is that what a product manager does could differ from one industry to another. It could differ from one company to another company within the same industry. And surprisingly, could also be very different between different teams in a given company. Given such a range of possibilities and such a varied dimension around what a product manager does, it might be helpful for us to start this discussion by demystifying what product management is all about. We are going to do that today with the help of three stories that I found extremely inspiring as a principal product manager working for Starbucks. Story number one, story of Dr. Hans Rosling. Dr. Hans Rosling was a Swedish medical practitioner and a professor. He has touched millions of lives across different parts of the world with his expertise. This story goes back to 1980s when Dr. Hans Rosling was working in the country of Mozambique in Africa. The times were difficult then. And to give you a sense of the statistics, there were on an average of two doctors catering to roughly 300,000 patients. That was the scale difference we were talking about. On an average, roughly 15,000 childbirths occurred within the districts that Dr. Hans Rosling managed. And of these 15,000 childbirths, unfortunately, more than 3,000 children died within the first year itself. It was in one of these times, back in 80s, that cholera was widespread. And given patients had a hard time getting to Dr. Hans's clinic, doctor and his assistants went on a tour around these different villages to attend to the patients directly at their houses. In one of these trips, Dr. Hansling and his assistants got to a village later in the evening. Doctor had never visited that village, and this was his first instance of going to that village. When villagers got to know that Dr. Hans Rosling had come to visit them, they were really excited. They flocked around him and started complimenting him for the wonderful work that he's doing. Doctor also got excited. He had never been to that village. He didn't know anyone there before. And in his memory, he hadn't treated anybody from that village. Doctor was wondering, why were those villagers adoring him? So doctor started inquiring further. He asked them, have I treated anyone from your village? And they said, yes, you have. you had treated a woman from our village who had come to your clinic for childbirth. Doctor got even more excited. That's wonderful. I would love to see her right away. Upon which the villagers responded that she died in his medical table at his clinic. Doctor started getting nervous and confused. Why were they adoring him when a woman from their village had given up her life at his clinic table? It didn't make sense, obviously. Then it all came back to Dr. Hans Rosling. This woman was brought by her villagers to his clinic, and when she had arrived, things were in a difficult state. Doctor tried hard to take the child out, but unfortunately, it's the child's limbs that came out first, which is a very complicated scenario. There was no way doctor could save the child, but unfortunately and tragically so, the mother also lost her life as part of the process. Doctor was shattered. And it's what he did after that event that provided a sense of respect and admiration for villagers. He made sure that the woman and the baby were wrapped properly in a white cloth. He arranged for a van for those bodies to be taken to their respective village along with the villagers who had accompanied that woman. And this was a big deal for villagers because it took long and far for them to get back to their villages. And had he not done that gesture, they wouldn't have been able to cremate her on the same evening. So the villagers remembered Doctor as somebody who had tried his best, unfortunately did not succeed, but still ended up showing the empathy and care to provide a due service to that woman. And that made him a hero in their minds. Lesson 1. Empathy goes a long way. Story number 2. The story of Navy SEALs. US military trains a number of young men and women as part of the Navy SEAL training. And it's considered to be one of the toughest training from a physical and a mental demand standpoint. Among several other exercises, one of the exercises that's undertaken by these prospective SEALs is to carry a boat as a team of 7, cross the ocean and get to a given destination from the shore. The part that makes this process really challenging is that the waves go as high as 10 to 12 feet. The only way to succeed in the mission as part of this SEAL training is to be well coordinated among those 7 members who are maneuvering the boat. And interestingly, it's been observed that a lot of times it's not the strongest team from a physical standpoint that ends up completing the challenge first. It's the team that bonds well together as a unit that succeeds. Lesson number 2. It takes a village to bring a product to life. Story number 3. The Airbnb story. Airbnb started back in 2007 as a very simple concept when 2 young men hit upon this idea of renting out their premise. When their rent was increased, they put up their apartment as available to stay, and a couple of strangers visited and stayed with them over the weekend. The fact that that weekend was really memorable made them feel that this idea has legs. The founders of Airbnb further developed on the idea. They created a website with the help of their friend and launched the platform. They also received funding and got mentored as part of the Y Combinator program. One important thing that they learned as part of the Y Combinator program was that it's better to have a product with 100 members or customers who really love the product rather than having a product which is probably just liked by 1,000 members. It's important to get that core customer base and that fan loyalty. And when they looked at the data, they realized that a lot of their customers were from New York. So what did they do? They traveled to New York, knocked at the doorstep of these customers to really try and understand how is Airbnb.com being used. One interesting insight they hit upon as part of these wonderful interactions with customers is that customers were having a difficult time capturing good photographs to advertise their property. And remember, this was pre-iPhone days. They also gained some valuable insights in terms of difficulties these customers are having in terms of using the website, which they could not have figured out sitting back at their offices. Armed with these insights, they came back to their offices, iterated on the product, and that was an inflection point for the product to really start taking off. Lesson number 3, listen to your customers. They will almost always tell you what you need to know. Armed with these 3 stories, let's now revisit our original question. What does product management mean? In light of these stories, product management can be distilled down to 3 simple guidelines. Number 1, empathize and be fallible. Be Dr. Hans Rosling. Number 2, champion the power of teams. Be a Navy SEAL. Number 3, advocate for your customer. Have a startup mentality. Let's look at each one of this. Number 1, empathize and be fallible. It's likely that the product that you and your team is building caters to a wide range of customers. These customers might differ in their age, gender, abilities, and general preferences. To cater to such a broad audience of customers, empathy is a core quality required by a product manager and his or her team. Many a times, the hypothesis that I've approached a problem with has proved to be false based on the customer feedback. And this is totally fine. The whole name of the game is to fail, learn from those mistakes, make improvements, move on, and keep failing more. Number 2, champion the power of teams. Be a Navy SEAL. There is a popular misconception that product manager has to be the creator of ideas. Reality can't be farther from true. A product manager can ideally be thought of as somebody who nurtures a plant. He need not create the plant. He has to merely ensure that the plant receives sunlight, water, and the right soil conditions. From a day-to-day aspect of things, this translates to the fact that product manager has to truly use the collective power or the capability of his team to bring the product to light. This is not only a sound good philosophy, it also is a reflection of how you cater to the customer needs. Given the diversity of customers, it's important that your team also reflects that diversity and brings in diverse perspectives as part of crafting and launching the product. Be a champion for your team and get the best of the team. Number 3, advocate for your customer. Customer advocacy starts with understanding the customer needs. And how do we understand customer needs? There are various tools or levers that we can use depending on the stage of the product maturity. One way to understand the customer needs very early on in the process is with market research. Once you have moved further along and got a better handle of the customer needs, then you might be co-creating the designs with your awesome design team. And at that point, you might want to get further validation from customers by testing different prototypes before investing the additional effort engineering and building those different variances. Once you've got a fair handle of what the product features need to be, you end up launching the product and you look at funnel metrics as a quantitative indicator on how well the customers are adapting to your product. You can supplement these quantitative measurements with qualitative feedback from customers too. That helps answer the why behind the what. Finally, if you want to further iterate or improve products, you can always experiment with different variants of the features with an A/B measurement and figure out the winner. On top of all of this, another interesting way to get customer feedback is to just talk to them, like how we saw in the Airbnb example. You might be pleasantly surprised with why the customers do certain things that they do. For example, when I spoke to a customer as part of my store immersion, I learned that the customer always places an order at Starbucks when he is in the premise, meaning the drive-through experience. The reason is that he always comes to the store with his daughter and they determine the order at runtime. Having understood these three simple guidelines, let's now talk in terms of where product management sits in an organization. And the chart that we see here is a good depiction of that. Product management can be thought as the intersection of business, technology, and design. Let's think through that. On a typical day, a product manager might interact with different business stakeholders to better understand their need and what they're really aspiring for from a financial standpoint. Based on those requirements, he or she co-creates the design with the design team and works closely with engineering team towards developing and launching that solution. As we already discussed, it's also likely that product manager would heavily lean on the research team to get additional customer insights as and when necessary. On top of this, the QA team also forms an integral part towards testing the solution and making sure that the quality is up to the mark. Interaction with these different sets of stakeholders underlines the fact that product management is a highly cross-functional role. The interesting thing is that, as we discussed earlier in the segment, what a product manager exactly does differs from company to company, industry to industry, or even within the same company across different teams, primarily because of the difference in which these three circles operate. Some product management function might be housed within the technology team, which means that their interaction with the technology counterparts and the design counterparts might be more compared to the business counterparts. In some other instances, the product management function might be housed within the business team, which means that the product management function would have more of a business flavor and less of a technology flavor. There are no right or wrongs in any of this. It's purely dependent on the need of the organization and what defines the success of product management as is perceived by that organization. It'll be interesting to pause at this point and think about how to visualize product management. A very common example that I've encountered frequently is describing product manager as a mini CEO. Based on my 18 years experience in the technology industry, I've honestly found that this definition is A bit glamorous, and B, a lot untrue. Why am I saying that? For two reasons. First and foremost, Product manager drives product with his or her influence and not because of their position. This is not the case with the CEO. CEO is the ultimate authority in most of the companies and call the final shots. Number two, in many instances, product manager might not own the P&L. And again, as we discussed previously, the flavor of the product management could be more business or more technology, depending on where they're housed. But in the several scenarios that I've seen, product manager does not directly own the P&L. This is unlike the CEO, who is directly responsible and answerable to the Wall Street in terms of the revenue and the projections for that company. A more appropriate analogy for a product manager would be to envision product manager as the conductor of an orchestra. In an orchestra, a composition that's played might be made by the conductor, but more likely than not is made by a different composer. If you compare that to product management example, a product idea might originate from a product manager, but in many instances might be accessible to him or her. The sign or the hallmark of a good product manager is to actively listen for good product ideas, no matter where they come from, and actively nurture them. Number two, the conductor of an orchestra coordinates different instruments and produces a great experience for the audience. The same is the case with product manager, as we saw previously. They have to coordinate across business, technology, and design functions to deliver a great experience for their customers. Number three, the success of a conductor is primarily based on how well the audience receive and appreciate that music or experience delivered to them. The success of a product manager, again very similar to the conductor, is based on how successful the product is and is accepted by the customers. Now that we have aligned on what product management is all about, let's switch gears and talk about the career options in product management. We'll do that with a fun trivia. Can you guess the name of these companies? Feel free to put it in the chat box. This company's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. We are talking about Google. The second company has a mission of inspiring and nurturing human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. Yes, it's Starbucks, the company that I have the privilege of working for. And finally, this company has the mission, let there be change. We're talking about Accenture. Now, what do these three companies have that pertains to our conversation here? These three companies represent three potential options for a given product manager. The first category of company is the technology company, and that's represented by the likes of Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, etc. The second category of companies we're going to talk about is more of industry sectors, and that pertains to companies involved in the retail sector, likes of Starbucks, Walmart, etc., or probably in the healthcare, insurance, or any other domains. And finally, the third category involves consulting, and that's represented by the likes of Deloitte, Accenture, McKinsey, Pricewaterhouse, etc. I've had the privilege of working across all of these three buckets as part of my career, and I'm hoping to share candidly on what product management role means in each of these buckets. First one, tech companies. We'll structure this conversation under three headers. The first one being the what, which is what do these companies do? Second one being how, meaning how do these companies make money, or in other words, what's the business model for these companies? And finally, we'll also cover the why part of it, meaning why would you want to be a product manager in this category of companies, or what does that experience look like rather. Tech companies. What do tech companies do? They deliver core technology products or services directly to the customers or to other businesses. For example, Amazon delivers products to your doorstep, and that's the B2C service that's provided by Amazon. Microsoft and even Amazon also has a B2B component around it where they offer cloud services to other businesses. And then there are the likes of Google, Facebook, etc., which offer services again to end consumer but monetize them using advertisements. That brings us to the second topic, which is how do these companies make money? There are three ways they do it. One is through B2B services, B2C services, or through advertising. There could also be other avenues, but I'm just touching upon the broad ones here. Finally, what is it like being a product manager in a technology company? The experience varies from one company to another, obviously, but what I'm trying to do here is to generalize or give you a broad flavor of what that entails. First, and the most important point is that these companies, by virtue of delivering technology products or services, are very fast paced. Technology evolves very rapidly on a day to day basis. And as a product manager, this would mean that you would need to be at the forefront of these changes working for these companies. They also get to widen their lens being in a technology company. And what I mean by that is that over the course of time, you get to work in varied set of products that the company is launching, and hence you get access to a wide portfolio there. Second one is the industry domains or the domain sectors. What do these companies do? Take the example of Starbucks. Starbucks serves coffee and starts the day for the customers by delighting them. Similarly, Walmart sells merchandise to customers directly. So primarily a lot of these domain sectors are into the B2C segment. What does it mean to be working as a product manager for a domain sector? One interesting consideration is that when it comes to the domain sectors, a lot of them have physical presence. So as a product manager at Starbucks, whenever I'm making technology decisions, I need to be mindful of how that would impact the barista who is serving the coffee to the end customer. Does the technology aid that experience, or does it get in the way of that interaction? Hence, that omni-channel view is a very important aspect, wherein you have to consider not only the digital side of things, but also the physical implication of it. Secondly, since you are in the domain sector over a period of time, you also get a good flavor of that domain working for these companies. Finally, we have consulting. And some of you might be wondering why I'm talking about product management role in the consulting context. Normally, the consulting companies come with the designation of consultants. What I'm talking of here is less about the actual title, but more about the mindset. So, in a typical consulting world, they offer different services to their end clients. And being a consultant, you travel to the client premise, work closely with the client to understand their problem, and help define the solution for them. By virtue of that, you inherently bring in a product mindset. How do these companies make money? Since they work closely with the clients, they get into contracts with these clients for delivering those services to them. What does it mean to work for a consulting company? First and foremost, it's one opportunity that offers the possibility of getting a very wide or a broad experience. And what I mean by that is, as a consultant, you might be working for a healthcare client, and then a few months from there on, you might switch and work for a retail client. And from there on, you might end up working for a technology client. So, over a period of time, you get to work across different industry segments and you get a wide exposure. It's also worth noting that consulting comes with a lot of travel. Again, a lot of that has got changed in light of the pandemic, but that's traditionally been a destination for people who love to travel. Winding up, let's ask this question: how do I get into product management? You might be wondering that all the information that I've mentioned is useful theoretically, but very tactically, how do you break into the product management roles? I have a three-pronged recommendation to that question. Number one, keep an open mind. What I mean by keeping an open mind is that one needs to recognize that product management role can take a linear or a non-linear path. In my experience, I finished my graduation, went on to work as an engineer for close to 5 years, did my management degree, got into a functional role, and eventually transitioned into a product management role. I do know a lot of very good friends of mine who are excellent product managers who have taken a more non-linear path without an MBA degree or an engineering degree. There are different ways in which you can get into product management roles, so the possibility is wide open. Number two, explore. Figure out whether there is any given company or any specific product that appeals to you. Try to learn more about that company or that role. Figure out what does the culture look like? How do people collaborate? How do people bring products to life? Are you excited by it? Would you love doing that? Reach out to people who are working in those roles or who know people in those roles who might be able to provide you more clarity. So keep exploring. And finally, always keep learning. Figure out if there is a mentor who can possibly help provide guidance to you on the professional and personal front. Go do that certification that you have been thinking about. That will help bridge any of the gap that you might possibly want to cover. Keep reading a lot of books. That will be helpful towards expanding the mindset and figuring out how a product management role plays out. In conclusion, I would offer that product management is not just about a title. It's about a mindset of how you operate. The fun is all about the journey. So good luck. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Ramki Vaidyanathan, and it's been a true pleasure talking to all of you. I would love to get your thoughts, comments, and feedback on how you think about product management and how you would want to approach it. Please feel free to use the QR code mentioned and share in your inputs. Thank you.